What's up, everyone, and welcome to ClearTalk. So, in this video, we're talking about um, a Reagan-appointed federal judge temporarily stopping the Trump administration for for moving male inmates from women's prison facility. So, we are going to talk about this. I have an article here to go over. This is, all with that executive order of that Trump did to keep men out of men who identify as women or trans men or trans women out of women's prisons. Uh, so and the backlash from that. So we're going to talk about the whole issue and go over this article. So if you like what I'm doing here, please consider subscribing, like, share, comment, all that good stuff. Check out my other channels: JMD Drummer, JMDPLAY, Discord there, one-time donation QR, or up top there, JMD Nation at Patreon, $3 a month. Any kind of support you give is very much appreciated, and I thank you very, 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 very much. Um, so yeah, so what we had was, President or Donald Trump executive order, which basically was a protection to women uh, in women's federal prisons facilities from having men that are biological men from being in those facilities, inmates in that facility, even if they are transgender women or identify as female, which we're going to get into that nuance in just a moment. But so what we had was, after that after that executive order um, came down, you had some inmates from a women's prison facility sue, um, did lawsuits to the Department of Justice, and this is what's kind of coming about of that. So, a Reagan-appointed federal judge temporarily stopped the Trump administration from moving three male inmates out of women's prisons facilities on Tuesday, in part because they don't, quote, present any threat to female inmates. District Judge Royce Lamberth, I hope I said that right, who took the bench in 1987, ruled on Tuesday to temporarily block President Donald Trump's executive order to keep men in men's prisons, even if they identify as women. The ruling was in favor of three male to female transgender women who sued the Department of Justice in the Washington, D.C. District Court to stop their transfer, alleging that Trump's directive violates federal law and their constitutional rights. Um, Goes on to say, women across and this is surely this is the precedent for the executive order, but women across the U.S. have reported trans identifying male inmates attacking or raping them in women's prison facilities. And it says male convicts also have a repeated pattern of committing violent crimes and later identifying as women in prison. Alarming policy experts, but drawing sympathetic media coverage. I don't really know about that in that case. Um, but the government has not, quote, the government has not so much as alleged that the plaintiffs in this particular suit present any threat to the female inmates housed with them, or that this threat cannot be managed locally by prison staff, Lamberth said in his court order. Thus, the public interest in seeing the plaintiffs relocated immediately to male facilities is slight at best. So Lamberth said that the male plaintiff showed, quote, significant evidence the Trump administration may be breaking the Eighth Amendment, which prohibits cruel and unusual punishment, by moving to separate inmates to separate inmates by sex, as the U.S. government has done for centuries. The judge downplayed the dangers male criminal convicts pose to women. Quote, even if the court credits the executive order's representation that housing biological males in female penitentiaries has some deleterious deleterious effect. I honestly don't know what the hell that word is. On privacy and security, deleterious effect. Um, anyway, by the government's own admission, there are only about 16 male to female transgender women housed in female penitentiaries, including the plaintiffs. So these three plaintiffs in this case are three of the 16 male to female transgender women that are in female penitentiaries. Down here it says data from the Federal Bureau of Prisons show that 1,538 or 15% of inmates in women's federal prisons nationwide are men, which is a weird thing to me. And I think this is an issue that is beyond the trans argument. So here's my thing. All right. What has been argued and what is being argued by these three plaintiffs is that they are at grave danger. Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't continue on. Lamberth also said that the plaintiffs cited evidence that transgender persons are at a significantly elevated risk of physical and sexual violence related to other inmates when housed in a facility corresponding to their biological sex. Meaning, if you put a transgender woman into a male facility because they are biologically male, or did you consider them biologically male, regardless of what their transgender like presence is, meaning like if they've like fully transed over or not, top, bottom, and everything, or whatever, because you consider them male anyways, regardless, because they're born male, putting them in there is, at a higher significant risk of physical and sexual violence, because that has been like recorded also. There's plenty of data for that. Being even being a straight man in male facilities, this happens. Okay, this is, and you think like this has been known forever. The weaker, or like the weak will be overcome, right? Just say that. Put it that way. So even straight, full on cis males in a male facility have had things like this happen. You think about putting a biological male that identifies or has even transformed themselves into a woman because that's what they identify with, how they would be, placed in a situation that would be even more, significant. I mean, the three men suing Trump's JOD filing anonymously as Jane Doe, and their criminal records are unknown. The JOD did not immediately respond to requests for comment. So that's the issue here, is that to just state that that you're protecting women, which I completely am behind and understand. But to claim, and this is the same argument even when it comes to bathrooms, when it comes to sports, when it comes to this, to argue that you're arguing this as if these are just males pretending to be women. Like they aren't really even like they're like they've just decided to just go walk up in these places and just be like, hey, like pretending to be like a woman, and not identifying and realizing that if they are truly a transgender, woman, they have been through, like, to put themselves through treatments or different things, estrogen or whatever treatments that they have put themselves through to literally transform their body to what they identify as, to put themselves through that, or even in even to the degree of surgeries or whatever to completely transform. They it's because they literally identify as a woman. They do not identify as a man. Okay. um so in their mind, regardless of what their body, what you know um degree that their body might represent a woman or not, in their mind they are a woman. They think like a woman, they act like a woman, they present themselves like a woman, or in the traditional sense, just the wide range traditional sense. I'm not trying to put all women in a box, but I'm just saying in the traditional sense. That's they think of themselves, whatever spectrum of a woman they consider themselves are. That's where they consider themselves a woman. And this should be gone to in any of these decisions where there's talking about the prisons, where you're talking about bathrooms, where you're talking about um sports, where whatever the case, when the transgender argument, you have to be taking this with nuance. You have to be taking this into consideration, all the different possibilities here. Now, this which is what they're trying to do. They would be trying to argue. Well, the worst possible case scenario is that you've got a man who's just pretending to be that way. Well, there is significant. It's not that complicated. It's not that hard to identify someone who's just pretending. It just is not. I'm sorry. Now, in the cases, and that I would even argue that probably most of the cases, if not all the cases, where women have reported trans identifying males to have attacked them, it was actual males literally just pretending, or even after the fact trying to get off with it by, identifying themselves as a woman, and just to try to get off easy on the act that they performed when they clearly were not. All right, that's a completely different argument. You're arguing against male, actual male, like, actions, actual male, decisions, not the decision of a trans person. Okay, you've got to learn to separate these things out. Your argument, your anger, your frustration is not towards trans people. It's towards actual men who are pretending to be a trans person, meaning they're not a trans person. There's a clear difference. So your hatred and your argument against trans people is not actually against trans people. Your fear is not of trans people. Your fear is of men. Men who act like men, men who act like the worst version of men, which has always been a problem throughout all of history. And in that argument, I completely understand protecting a woman when she needs and feels like she needs to be protected in the arenas and spaces and whatnot. But understand that you're not, your problem is not with the trans person, and not with the trans woman, because the trans woman identifies as a woman in their mind. It just is. Whether you believe that or agree with that is a possibility, it is. You can call that a mental whatever. You can argue that it's a mental derangement or a mental like issue that they need a psychiatrical issue or whatever the case. You can argue that if you want. It doesn't it doesn't take away from the fact that that's what they identify as though. And that's the problem with this whole argument around trans people and the fear around trans people is it's not actually a fear for trans people. It's not a fear of trans people. It's a fear of the thing that you've always feared your whole life. And that is like the worst versions, the worst kinds of men who are out to pervert and, you know, manipulate, take advantage of a woman in any instance. So that's the problem here. But like in this argument, to have a to force like given that the only option is to just force a trans woman to have to be in a male facility, okay, um, is endangering them. It is. It is putting them in a position that, without a shadow of a doubt, they are going to be victims, legitimate victims of the things that you are claiming you're protecting the women from in the women's prisons. You're subjecting them to the exact same actions in the male prisons. Now, if you want to make the argument that there needs to be some rearrangement of the facilities, perhaps, and have a section for trans women, have a section for cis women, fine. I can see an argument there, and we can have discussion, or that can be a discussion and plans and things made in that instance. And I would say that would be a more reasonable argument. But what concerns me is this statement here, because this is not stating that these are trans inmates. This is just stating that they're men. Why is 15% of women's federal prisons have men in them? Is this a overflow of men's federal prisons where they're putting men in the women's federal prisons? Is that what this is? I'm confused. I truly need to look this up because I didn't think this was a thing. And if that is a thing, then that is the bigger argument. That is the bigger thing to be concerned about. Now, I would hope and think that these are men that are kept separated in some form or fashion in the women's federal prisons, like completely blocked off from them so that they have no access. But that's the more concerning thing. Not the trans woman actual trans woman anyways, or trans women in the facilities. But let me know what you think about this whole thing. Right now, it is stopped by this federal judge. I'm sure the things will be litigated out, and we'll see where it goes from here. If I see an update in this, I'll try to go over it and give you the results. And I'm sure there's probably going to be even more. I mean, that there still leaves another 13 inmates, according to this article, that are trans women that are actually in women's facilities. Out of the 16, this is 3 out of 16. That leaves 13. So I don't know if there's going to be more cases in those 13. To try to prevent them from being moved as well. But anyways, if I see anything about it, I will talk back through it. But let me know what you think about this. How do you feel about the whole, trans argument, whether it's in the case like this in prisons or whatever, the bathroom argument, the school or, sports argument. Let me know what you think. And, do you agree or understand where I'm coming from at least? Or do you completely disagree with, my thoughts? Let me know. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So thank you very much. Peace. Clear Talk. I'm out.